Dragon Ball, horror, kaiju, and more. Steven's Toy Reviews.
Hello collectors, it's going to be Steven here, and welcome to a diet figure fight. There are a few BioGoji Godzilla 1989 action figures on the market right now, and this is something that a lot of folks are going to be taking a look at. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and take a look to see which action figure, without any of the gimmicks that might be available, is going to be worth adding into your collection when we go toe-to-toe in the ring, but in a more laid-back format. Grab your snacks, let's ring that bell, and let's get started with the Diet
Figure Fight.
So before we really get into the meat and taters of this diet figure fight here, obviously the question's going to be, why are we doing a diet figure fight? Why don't we have the normal paint scheme for BioGoji here up on the table? Well, there are a few reasons. First and foremost, for Super7 sending out the BioGoji paint scheme, and for Rose Biollante, I did want to note that that's pretty much going to be the bulk of it there. I didn't want to have any assumed bias there one way or another from anyone who's noting that I may give points one way or another, and furthermore, if there's any sort of positive or negative there, even if I articulate my point very clearly, I'm sure that there are going to be mental gymnastics that folks will go through to say Steven is saying this for that reason or another. And furthermore, I did note throughout all of my coverage of Super7 stuff that this is amazing, and this is the best Ultimates Toho-related figure that they have done so far, and this is the better paint scheme of the two releases. So, pertaining to that, folks do have access to this. It's available on BBTS right now, and they did offer it directly, Super7 did, so why not have some fun and give all of the contenders that are in front of you the best opportunity in this matchup that they could. So let's go ahead and talk about these figures. Alright, so let's go ahead and actually talk about the size comparisons, the scaling right off the top, so we can get that out of the way. Obviously, this is going to be a BioGoji Godzilla 1989 figure fight, so we're going to go ahead and talk about how they look against Biollante action figures that are on the market. We do have the SH MonsterArts Biollante there, and then we have Super7's Rose Biollante over there. So what I will say is, unfortunately, NECA never did a Biollante figure. They did do 89. So in terms of scaling with a Biollante figure, perhaps, you can fudge the scaling a little bit with the SH MonsterArts and perhaps Super7's. We don't really have one for him, but there's going to be a point when it comes to the end of this section that I am going to make. For the MonsterArts, that one is particularly scaled to go with this one, and remember, BioGoji is meant to be about 80 meters, so it's naturally, when it comes to actual scaling, meant to be smaller, so for sizing, that is going to be pretty good. When it comes to Super7's, it's pretty hard, at least for me, to really get a good sizing for how big compared to those two it is in the movie. Perhaps Super7 has actual access to stills and so forth, but nevertheless, I think that that's going to be pretty solid for something that's going to be on your shelf. But when it comes to actual sizing for an overall kaiju collection, we do have to look out beyond just that when we're looking at multiple figures. So when it comes to actual scaling for an inline Biollante, by default, the NECA doesn't have anything to stand on, but we have those two which do scale well. But that's not going to be the only thing that gives either of them a point, so let's actually look at more kaiju. And another size comparison that I wanted to do, since the BioGoji and Gedo-Goji suits, they're usually compared to each other, and sometimes folks just use a substitute for one of the other. So here are going to be some King Ghidorah figures. We do have the MonsterArts King Ghidorah, the Heisei one, and then the movie Monster Series one that just recently got released. So in terms of scale, I know that we kind of here just have one that's not really in scale with any of the action figures one can purchase, and then we have one that's, well, realistically showing a bias, but I do think that this is going to be something that folks either do have access to or eventually will have access to, and we're going to go ahead and show another size comparison for you here. And here's going to be the last size comparison we'll get out of the Godzilla universe, because there are probably a good amount of people who do like kaiju figures that collect more than just Godzilla. We have the recent repaint of the 1999 Gamera figure in the SH MonsterArts line, and then we have a throwback with NECA's knife head. Glad I pulled that one out of storage. So when it comes to scaling, I'm going to have a whole other video kind of talking about scaling, and we may have the three amigos here come on back. So when it comes to scaling, we do have, relative scaling where Godzilla is going to be the same size, and then we have actual scaling, which it's going to be, we have a 100 meter Godzilla at 6 inches, 50 meter at 3 inches, and so forth. So when it comes to scaling and what is standard for Godzilla collectibles in the smaller scale, it's usually been around the 6-inch mark, and that's been mostly thanks to the movie Monster series. So when it comes to blending in a kaiju figure into your collection, the 6 inches is going to pretty much be the standard. So I think the NECA is really good for that. When it comes to actual scaling, the BioGoji MonsterArts, I think that is going to get a point there. Now, in universe for their own specific lines, the Super7 does have a related Rose Bio Sculpt and action figure, and you can see, we can kind of fudge the scale a little bit there with Knifehead and maybe some other larger domestic kaiju figures, but what I would say is I'd like to see where Super7 goes continuing for their kaiju figures. Reason being is that they're only up to wave 4, which at the time of publication, we don't have official confirmation if that is going to go in production. I will note that they have noted that they have had to cancel some releases across MMPR, Disney. So let's wait and see. I have faith. I'm crossing everything here, even what you can't see off camera. So if it does pan out, I think retroactively, we can maybe say it's good. But for right now, in terms of scaling for what may be best for your overall kaiju collection, I think these two are going to be what most collectors are really going to look for, with that one being an up-and-comer. Now that we have the sizing portion out of the way, did you think I forgot about Sculpt and Paint? I didn't. I just needed to get the space cleared out of my studio because I had some big figures there, and I needed to put those back in their boxes. So let's talk about the Sculpt and the Paint, because now we actually have an opportunity on the channel to have references in really high quality, not just sort of upscaled, if you will. So let's go ahead and just get some 360 spin views of all of the contenders that we have on the screen right now. So let's go ahead and talk about the MonsterArts, the NECA, and the Super7. So when it comes to all of these figures, I think that they all meet the criteria for looking like, at minimum, a Heisei Godzilla, and I think that's what fans are really, really going to look forward to when making a purchase for any of these figures. When it comes to the SH MonsterArts, fans already know that this project, entirely when the line started, you can even check out my MonsterArts 10 Years of Destruction video, was a Yuji Sakai personal pet project that he approached Bandai with, and then they decided to go off and running with it into a full-fledged action figure line. So he did sculpt this particular figure, and that is something that fans are really going to like. Yay, we do have somebody who worked on the suits making the actual figures here, so that is going to be a plus for the figure. We do also have some really nice shading and different dry brushing and so on and so forth. The details on the keloid scarring and the scutes and the dorsal plates, obviously, I've already talked about that. It does look rather nice. When it comes to the NECA, though, we do have some rather nice detailing here. Even keeping in mind the price point, around the time that this was released, NECA was already doing some really grade A stuff in some of their other lines, and taking a look at the NECA head sculpt, it doesn't quite match some of the other output that they had at the time across pretty much all of their other lines. It doesn't really feel like something that they put in the entire effort that the team collectively had, so I'm kind of wondering exactly why the sculpt didn't quite turn out to be really BioGoji in nature. It kind of looks more so like a generic snarling Heisei-era Godzilla. When it comes to the Super7, this is really nice looking. Admittedly, no, it's not going to be Yuji Sakai on the box, which, you're going to have access to him if you're a company in Japan, but the sculpted details are really, really good. We do once again have some nice fine grooves to really recreate the scarring and the scutes that Godzilla is going to have, and then when it comes to the facial expressions that he comes with, even with the alternate head sculpt where he's roaring, we do have a nice snarl and exposed teeth that I do think that the Heisei-era Godzilla collectively is known for, and even specific for BioGoji. There are some softer details that folks may or may not agree with here or there, but I do think that for this particular paint scheme of this Godzilla, the dry brushing and the washes and all of that really enhance the overall look. So for editing purposes, I'll snap back to here, and I think that it's very difficult to say that the SH MonsterArts is leaps and bounds better than the Thirsty for Blood paint variant or vice versa. In their own right, I think they excel in what they do. So I'm going to say this, I think that they're both equal in their own right. Oh, hot take, I know. So for articulation of these guys, this is kind of a difficult spot because we got to talk about a few things. I think when it comes to the NECA and the Super7, they're pretty close to each other. It's better to show and not tell. Remember, we did that in school growing up, right? So let's go ahead and make sure we are focused in for the NECA, right? Okay, we are now focused in, and we do have a jaw hinge, opens and closes. We have a ball joint where the neck plugs in, ball joint there. We do have swivels and hinges for the arms at the shoulders. We do have that. We do have an elbow hinge. We do have a wrist with a swivel and hinge. And instead of alternate hand parts, they did go with finger hinges so we can open and close them. We do have a ball joint at the waist, and we can spin around there, and we can rock from side to side. We do have ball jointed hips, so we can move out that far, move in, do that. We do have knee hinges, which do bend. They do also twist and turn. The ankles have a little bit of a rocker that move from side to side. And then from the tail, we do have ball jointed segments all the way up until right here, where we do have a bit of a bendy wire. And for the tail articulation, he can pretty much do that, but keep in mind the tail was not inserted in the packaging. You had to pop that on yourself. And that is something that, for whatever reason, just likes to pop off. So we do have great tail articulation, but in some areas it is good, but a bit limited if you really want to get Godzilla to get into super awesome articulated dynamic poses, but he is pretty solid. So for Super7, we're going to have to get a little bit funky with the camera angling here, so I'm going to have to pull him probably about right here or so. For Super7, the articulation is pretty solid. We do have the head, which plugs in on a ball joint, and then here, it is a bit of a ball joint, but it is mostly focusing on swivel movement. We do have a little bit of tilt access here or there, which is good, but it definitely could use a little bit more range of movement. Swivels and hinges as shown before in the actual review, but we do have that little bit that wants to pull down for some reason. We do have bicep swivel, and you can see the arm is twisting around. We do have a hinge and swivel movement, which is good. The wrists are swivel hinges. The waist does swivel. Okay, we'll just do that. You know he spins all the way around. We do have ball jointed hips, which are good. We do have the knees, which do bend on a hinge and swivel. The ankle rockers are fantastic from side to side, and they hinge. And then the tail, which is a point of contention by many, because while it does have a pretty alright range of movement when we look back at the old SH MonsterArts figures, almost by that standpoint, by today, even the NECA had a better range of movement there. So it works, but it definitely does seem like Super7 is starting to experiment with how they can make articulated kaiju action figures. When it comes to the MonsterArts, it is going to be, I think, the best of the bunch here, and some folks may say it's for the price and the size. However, there is one flaw with the MonsterArts that I think some people may have forgot about. It's not going to be with the jaw hinge that some folks think that the mouth does have a little bit of a curve to, which is fine. I don't think it's that bad. We do have multiple ball joints here, which allow you to turn and get Godzilla to look in a whole bunch of different directions. The ball joints for the shoulders are good. He can T-pose, no problem, but that actually comes into play with an issue that I had. It's not insofar as all the ball joints are loose and they like to pop out. It's in that, well, this particular Biogoji had a lot of tight joints, and some folks actually sheared the plastic, and that resulted in some breakages with the figure. So if you do have a broken figure, like you sheared this bicep swivel off, then, well, you've got a bigger problem on your hands. There's also a point to note that for pricing and replacements, well, that's pretty difficult to do if you do have something that is, well, this expensive and production ends and you're not able to get a replacement from Bandai Namco Toys and Collectibles America. The waist is actually surprisingly a bit limited and you can't turn all the way from side to side, but for the hip movement and so forth, double knee hinge, which is able to do that. And then, of course, the tail movement, which is the best of the bunch. But I suppose that an argument for those tight joints, you can loosen them up with really not a lot of an issue if you know what you're doing, or you can look up tutorials even from yours truly. So for articulation, I do think that in terms of actually getting the joints to move, the MonsterArts is going to win with an asterisk pertaining to make sure that you don't fudge anything and you don't break it. That is something that you want to make sure about there. Accessories, what do we have? Well, the MonsterArts literally has none. And when we consider the price, which we're going to talk about in a second, that's kind of not a great look. So we'll leave it at that for right now. For the NECA, we do have a beam effect, which is really cool. And NECA does have ultimate figures like the Ultimate Creep from Creepshow, Ultimate Jason from Insert Movie here. Yeah, so that's kind of what they do. So this isn't an ultimate figure, but we do have a beam effect, and for its box, just as a note, we do have an open and closed flap box, which does have the movie poster on it, which I'm not going to count that as an accessory just because it's straightforward there, pretty simple. But for the beam, that's kind of the extent of it there. While it does look pretty cool, Godzilla can't really move his head around too much to really use the beam, and I was a little rough with it there, but it does kind of fall out. So he can kind of mostly point the beam down or up a little bit, so your mileage may vary there. In terms of Super7, this is the Thirsty for Blood variant, which is based off of a cover which Art Adams himself, who is included as an accessory, did have. So you know, that's the theme here, and he comes with the figure, which is thumbs up. Now, the box for the Dark Horse variant is not only the cover, but when we take the slip cover off, we do have a nice theme here. So I'll go ahead and throw up some B-roll footage of that. And I think that in terms of a box, normally I would not consider that whatsoever in terms of an accessory, but that is just really cool. And if you're going to do a fancy presentation of a box, that realistically speaking is how you do it. Putting the movie poster on there is nice. Having the window flap is nice. But if you're going to go the extra mile to really spruce up the packaging and have that presented, I think when it comes to everything factored in, Super7 really went the extra mile here. Super7, I think, wins just a little bit by nudging everything out for accessories, not including, you know, the extra hands and the roaring mouth. Now, let's go ahead and talk about that price. So, when we go from the most affordable to the most expensive, the NECA pretty much wins by default because at its peak at the time when NECA was releasing Godzilla-related figures, this one topped out at $25, so there you go. For the aftermarket prices, that really isn't built into the actual cost of the figure. So you could find it anywhere on aftermarket sites or private sales for $50-$60, but that's not what they were going for with the figure. So you have to keep in mind, this is a $25 figure. For the Super7, yes, it is an SDCC exclusive, but it is available through BBTS at the time of posting this video for $85, taxes, shipping, and handling were appropriate, and then Super7 was selling this directly. So even if you weren't at SDCC, you still had a chance to get it. And then the MonsterArts, the yen does need to be taken into consideration, but through US distribution, it was $85 to $90. So for that reason, just in and of itself, for going through the prices, and, you know, a comparison of what we talked about here, regardless of what you want to split hairs on, the NECA is going to be the most affordable for your dollar. Alright, and there you have it. When we factor everything in for the points and so forth for this diet figure fight, the SH MonsterArts is going to be the one that, for kaiju collectors looking for an action figure of Byogoji, that's going to be the one to take home. The NECA does have some pros, but it does have a few things that are holding it back, and though the Thirsty for Blood version of their 1989 sculpt is neat in its own right, it's not quite there to be crowned the winner, but as a one-off figure, it's very... And this is going to be the wildcard round to transition us over to the last sappy portion of the video. It's very cool, and it definitely deserves a purchase as it's one-off. The last point, coolness. What? Let's talk. So when we talk about the coolness factor that I wanted to bring up and kind of a retrospective here for the last thing I'm going to talk about for the video, when it comes to the SH MonsterArts line, when folks are looking to pick up a figure and they're looking to make their purchase, it's undoubted, regardless of what your opinion is of the line, that it is really, really neat. I touched on it a little bit in one of the sections about this being Yuji Sakai's pet project where he approached Bandai to make a Godzilla action figure to begin with, and because they liked it so much, they actually turned it into an action figure line based off of the SH Figuarts line. So we have Yuji Sakai, Shinichi Wakasa, we do have people who worked on the CG models for the actual source material, whether it be King Kong, Shin Godzilla, or even the recent Gamera series. They actually were consulted to make the figures. Where do you get that? So admittedly, North American domestic companies, they don't have access to those people, so they can't get to that level, but they do have the people who worked on the source material working on the figures. And Bandai has been working with Toho since how many years ago now? Decades now. So there is a closer relationship to that. And though the SH MonsterArts line does have its faults, there are a lot of pros that I think for when it comes to the classic idea of a kaiju action figure, that's the reason why folks turn to SH MonsterArts and they want to make that purchase. When it comes to NECA, though they are out of the game right now for insert reason here as to why they no longer have the license, when they were released, and I'll admit, I did give them, well, let me rephrase that, I put them through the ringer for a bit. They were affordable, they were on shelves, even though the SH MonsterArts line is now to a degree, and folks really did like them and they had their own charm. Admittedly, not as accurate as they could be, but nevertheless, it was something that was available and folks did have the ability to purchase. And hey, it's fun. Pretty much everything they did was 6 inches and it blended in well regardless of what you wanted to get. When it comes to Super7, here's something that I will make note of for those of you who may or may not know. Brian Flynn, the guy who owns the company and one of the founders of it, has actually been involved in the kaiju community since pretty much day one. There are people he's made connections with who are in the kaiju community. You may have heard the saying that you're a particular person kind of guy. He's contributed to Super7 magazines. We do have the designers who are actively in the community and talking to people and interacting with people. So when it comes to Super7, they are deep rooted in the kaiju community from day one of when Super7 started. They even work to have their own paint variants. And when they come up with really neat things like this, and even working on things like this as well, turning this into an Ultimates figure as well, there's a lot of coolness that can be tapped into to here, and I'm really excited to see where this is going, and this is where I give you the send-off for the video. These all get an extra point for coolness factor for whatever that may be. The day of publication publicly for this video, those of you who are OG fans of STR, not that I'm expecting you to remember everything to the T, right? But for those of you who may be new as well, it's going to be August 25th, 2023. My channel was originally for different purposes, and I converted it on that day to what wasn't STR at that point, but eventually turned into it back in 2013. Yep, that's right. At the day of publication, I uploaded my first SH MonsterArts review, and today it's 10 years old. So I've been with the kaiju community, and I've been with Dragon Ball, Pokemon, TMNT, a whole bunch of different stuff for a little over 10 years, but posting videos and so forth, it's been a decade now. I remember when I started STR, I was working on my undergrad degree, and I was with my parents, with my then girlfriend, now wife, and I just remember having just that small oval table with the blue backdrop and just had my phone, and I was working on videos. And now here I am, a completely different table, completely different bed sheet, different lighting setup entirely, with many figures that have entered, that have left my collection, different opportunities working with this person or that person, different support coming from really extreme levels to even just, I can't even talk about it as much as I would like to. Anyone who's ever supported the channel in any way, shape, or form, even if you've just watched one of my videos, that means the world to me, and I thank you for that. I've thought about multiple times over the years, maybe just putting a bullet in it, if you will, and ending STR, and I'm sure there are going to be some folks elsewhere who say, yeah, good job, maybe you should, but I don't really care. I even thought about actually today if I didn't hit some internal goals ending STR, but over the summer I thought about a few things, and I think I really want to keep it going for a few different reasons. And I'm going to keep going until I get bored of it. And I don't think that's going to be anytime soon. So with that being said, thank you to everyone who's supported. Thank you to anyone who's helped me out. And I really mean that. I really do. Collect what you like, love what you like, have the good times. Let's have a good another however many years we're going to be doing this. With that being said, thank you so much for watching. Take care. Here's going to be the thank you end card to the patrons who have supported for this last month. Some different things are going to be coming up, but I've already posted that by the time this video publishes, I believe. And stay tuned because we're going to have the end card for the video coming up. We have Gamera Bonanza coming up for the next month. I am so excited to bring you MonsterArts and vinyl stuff. It's going to be really, really great. Thanks again for watching. Take care. I'll catch ya in the next video.